My parents demand I change my wedding date for a trip to Australia with my brother Dorado and his family. But I told them yes. And now they're crying because I got married without them. 5 days ago, my girlfriend of 6 years and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony. Initially, it was just supposed to be with our families and a couple of very close friends. But unfortunately, perhaps fortunately, my family couldn't attend. To be more precise, my family could have attended. For them, going on vacation to Australia with my brother and his family seemed to be a bigger priority. My wife and I have been together for 6 years and got engaged about 10 months ago. We hadn't formally invited anyone or sent out the invitations until about 4 weeks ago. But we knew when we wanted to get married and both informed our families 8 months in advance so they could save the date. When the time for the wedding arrived, my parents assured me that they would keep it in mind. Honestly, I didn't expect them to do what they ultimately did, but I guess I should have expected it, because I've always had a somewhat tense relationship with my parents. I grew up in a family where my brother was known as the prodigy child, and I was just the troublemaker. My brother is 4 years older than me and has always been better at everything, whether it's his grades, sports, or other activities. Of course, I felt a bit overshadowed by him when I was little, but I thought that feeling would eventually fade away. It might have disappeared if my brother had been a less arrogant person, but he constantly seemed to provoke me on purpose. He always mocked me, bullied me with his friends, and I was a particularly small child, so it was pretty easy for him to do. I always tried to complain to our parents, but they never believed me. To them, my brother was the perfect child, probably incapable of making mistakes. That went on for a long time, and by the time I got to high school, I had so much pent-up resentment against my brother that I made an effort to cause trouble whenever I could. If I couldn't be as good as my brother, then I'd be remembered in other ways, right? From my childhood, I had developed a bit of a rebellious attitude, and it only got worse as I grew older. By then, my brother already had a job, and even so, didn't stop trying to show off. One day after I graduated from high school, he said something really sarcastic about me being a disappointment, or something like that, and I just lost my temper. I had been looking for a fight for a long time, and that day we finally clashed. That was almost 10 years ago, and we haven't spoken since. I'm quite happy about that because, honestly, I think my life improved a lot after I stopped talking to him. I think I got a lot of my rage against him out the day I hit him. I also got pretty beaten up, but I was happy to have given him at least the black eye he really deserved. Of course, after that, my parents were very upset with me because they thought I had provoked him and had sought a fight on purpose. They were never willing to believe that it was always my brother who provoked me and tried to make me fight with him. Even that day, they didn't believe me. They were very cold towards me for the following weeks, and things only started to improve when I left for college, probably because they were going to be left alone after that, and wanted to make things right with me before I left. But I never forgot how they treated me, and although I kept in touch, I just couldn't forget how unfairly they treated me compared to my brother. The only reason I invited them to my wedding was that they were the only family I had. I'm not particularly close to any of my relatives, and my grandparents, unfortunately, are no longer with us. Despite our tense relationship, we had made an effort to stay in touch over the past 10 years. They also tried to make me reconcile with my brother several times, but I don't think either of us was interested. He got married about 6 years ago and now has 2 children. I wasn't invited to his wedding, and I didn't care at all. My parents even tried to get me to invite him to my wedding this time, but that definitely wasn't going to happen. I know he's still the same arrogant and unbearable brat as always, because we have to see each other during the holidays when we go home. And his behavior hasn't changed in the slightest. The only difference is that we no longer acknowledge each other's existence. I'm also still aware that my parents have a soft spot for him, but I still didn't expect them to simply go on vacation with him and his family and not even care that I was getting married around the same time. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose. Because if it came to that, our parents would definitely choose them over me because that's what they've done our whole lives. He probably wanted to make me feel bad, and in a way, he succeeded, because right now, I feel absolutely horrible about all my decisions. Anyway, a couple of weeks before, just as we sent out the formal invitations, my parents visited me and told me they probably wouldn't be able to attend because just 3 days earlier, my brother had invited them to join him on his family vacation to Australia. It was a fully paid trip, as it was a perk for my brother, who had greatly impressed one of his clients and wanted to take his entire family with him. So they couldn't postpone it because my brother had already taken the time off. And my parents expected me to postpone my wedding since it was only going to be friends and family, and we were getting married at a place that belonged to one of my wife's relatives. Obviously, it would be more reasonable for them to expect me to postpone my actual wedding rather than them declining the trip. They told me they were really excited and looking forward to spending time with their grandchildren, and they hoped I would understand. I wanted to argue with them, but instead, I just smiled at them and said, "It's okay, I'll wait." They were puzzled and didn't even think I wasn't serious. They seemed satisfied with my response, so they left. I talked to my wife about it, and she was also quite surprised because we had always known that my brother was more important to them. But for them to so blatantly leave me out was just so disrespectful. Obviously, we had no intention of waiting or postponing our wedding and decided to go ahead with it, with or without them. So 5 days ago, around the time we were supposed to get married, we held the wedding and posted about it in the afternoon. That really surprised my parents because I had promised them I would wait, and I didn't when they saw the photos. They started calling and texting me immediately, but I ignored them because it was my wedding day and I didn't even bother to read the messages until the next day. The next morning, when I woke up, I read the message they had sent me, and it was exactly what I expected. They said they were very disappointed in me and didn't expect me to betray them in that way. I decided to contact them and talk to them about what had happened, because I really had a lot to say to them, and I'm sure they could say the same about me. It didn't take long for them to answer my call, and as soon as they picked up, they started yelling at me. They said they had never felt so insulted as they did the day before, as everyone was shocked that I hadn't invited them to my wedding. Since I wasn't close to the rest of my family and was also a bit introverted, no one had expected to be invited to my wedding, but everyone apparently thought my parents would be there without a doubt, and were shocked to see the photos and not find my parents anywhere. So everyone in the family had a lot of questions. It was very typical of my parents to care more about what others thought and about what they had put me through. Anyway, I decided to tell them what I thought and said that I had no intention of waiting for them to return from their vacation with my brother and his family, even though I had said so because I knew arguing with them would be pointless. It's not like they were going to turn down the trip with their golden child and his family, even if it meant skipping my wedding. I was already very busy, so I didn't have the energy to argue with them, and that's why I promised I would wait. In my opinion, I was completely justified in what I was doing and didn't owe them an explanation. I also mentioned everything that had happened in the past, like how they never believed my brother was a horrible and arrogant person and how they always treated me unfairly. Even now, they couldn't see that my brother had specifically chosen that time to invite them on the vacation, because he knew it was more special for them. If he could get my parents to skip my wedding, it would be the greatest victory for him. That's exactly what happened. So my parents had once again shown me that my brother was more important to them than me. They now had no right to question me about my decisions, because I was already tired of them and wasn't going to be sidelined anymore. Then I was about to hang up. My parents told me that apparently my brother didn't know I was getting married around the same time. They said that if I had told them that I wanted them at my wedding and wasn't willing to wait, they would have declined the trip and been with me instead. However, instead of being transparent with them, I decided to play mind game, and now I was acting like a victim in the situation. I didn't expect that reaction from them, so I decided to talk to them a bit more. They told me that apparently They hadn't even told my brother I was getting married, and since I hadn't invited the rest of my family, they didn't know either. So he had no idea I was getting married around the same time he was going on vacation, and he invited them without any ulterior motives. Apparently, they only decided to talk to me because they knew that if they chose to go on vacation with my brother and his family, it would be unlikely they would have such an opportunity in the near future, since my brother has been very busy since he started his own business. So instead of just turning down the trip without talking to me, they decided to talk to me and ask if I would be comfortable with the idea of postponing my wedding for a couple of weeks. If I had said no, or had been honest with them, they would have turned down the vacation and been with me at the wedding. As for what had happened in the past, they said they were willing to accept that. In some way, they had been at fault for never acknowledging that maybe my brother could have been horrible to me and that I could have been telling the truth. However, I never helped the situation, as I always tried to create trouble, seek attention in the most drastic ways, and try to be a nuisance to the family. So I couldn't completely blame them for not believing me when I tried to make them see that my brother was always attacking me. When they put it that way, I couldn't help but think that maybe they were right. However, at that moment, I wasn't in the mood to believe them. So I accused them of lying about whether my brother knew I was getting married or not. Even if he hadn't known, there was no way my parents would have told me. After accusing them of doing this on purpose, I argued with my parents and told them that if they really had wanted to be there for me at my wedding, they wouldn't have even asked me if it was okay to postpone it. They simply would have been there for me without asking questions. They wouldn't have even considered the idea of going on vacation with my brother and his family while abandoning me. I accused them of making up excuses to cover up their mistakes and trying to manipulate me into thinking I wasn't the victim, but the one at fault in the situation. I thought they were going to argue with me, but instead, they just told me that I hadn't outgrown my old phase and was still the troublemaker who sought attention in the worst possible ways. Then they hung up, and I could tell they were very disappointed. My mother had been crying because it was very sad for her that while she was on vacation, I had posted a bunch of wedding photos as if they didn't mean anything. Even though I was really upset and angry with them, I didn't even take the time to think about their perspective during the first few days. But now, the more I think about the conversation I had with my parents, the less sure I feel that I might have been right. At first, I was very sure of myself that I hadn't done anything wrong, but now I'm not so sure anymore. Obviously, there's no way to prove whether my brother knew when I was going to get married or if he did all this on purpose. But I have a strong hunch that my parents must have told him I was getting married around this time, and he specifically chose that time to go on vacation with his family and invite my parents to join him. It was too suspicious, but that's all I can base it on, my hunch, and I really don't know if what I think is true or not. So, in case it's not, I guess I was wrong in some way. But that's the problem. I'm not sure about anything yet. I'd like to say that if my parents had really wanted to be there for me on my wedding day, they would never have even considered going on vacation with my brother and his family, and wouldn't have asked me to postpone my wedding. However, if I had talked to them, the situation might have turned out different. I don't know. The only thing I know for sure is that they were right about one thing. I never made it easy for them to be on my side when I was younger, 'cause I was definitely a troublemaker and a complete brat. My brother had always been the model child. No matter how much he bullied me in private, always did his best in everything. And that's not something I can take away from him. So maybe if I had put my energy into trying to be more like him, who knows, maybe my parents would have found it easier to be on my side. Anyway, I'm really confused about all this, and I don't know if I should apologize to my parents. All my life, I've believed that my brother was treated better because my parents were biased towards him, but maybe I never did enough for myself. And maybe I'm not really the victim here. Even now, I'm not sure if my brother knew when the wedding was going to be or not. I just don't know anything. So I desperately need some clarity. Am I the asshole for telling my parents that I'd wait for them to return from their vacation, but eventually getting married without them? Update 1. So my parents returned from their vacation. As soon as they landed, they came straight to my house from the airport. I knew because I could see their luggage and stuff when they arrived in the taxi. My wife and I have been married for just over a week now, and we've discussed the situation with my parents several times. I've also gone through the comments and talked to several friends. Many people are on my side, and others think I could have avoided all this drama. But the bottom line is that the damage is already done, and I don't think my parents can get over it, nor can I. So I had practically given up any hope of reconciliation with my parents. And honestly, I didn't even want to. It seemed pointless, because throughout my life, they had always preferred my brother over me, and they didn't even deny it when I mentioned it during our last phone call. They accepted it, but also tried to blame me for it at the same time. I accepted that we both had different opinions, and maybe we were both right, or maybe we were all wrong, but it didn't matter anymore. We couldn't undo what had happened, and that's how I planned to handle the situation. But I guess my parents had other plans. When they arrived at my door, I was very confused because they still had their luggage and stuff with them, and I thought they were coming here to live with me. That scared me a little, but they later clarified that they had to come directly to my house from the airport. Anyway, I invited them in, and they skipped all the small talk and told me that, based on my behavior, it was very obvious that we had a lot to talk about. We wanted our family to work. I didn't know what to say to that, because I really had no plans to discuss anything with them. I already knew it wouldn't make any sense, and we'd just end up stuck talking in circles again. So I tried to tell them I needed some time and space to sort out my thoughts. But they said they had made the effort to come directly to me after their vacation just because I was important to them. So I needed to treat them with the same importance, and we needed to talk about this now. I had been quite upset about everything that had been happening with my family since I had that fight with my parents, so I really wasn't in the mood to talk to them. When they insisted that I treat them with the same importance and play by their rules, I started to get really angry again. So I lost control and told them that just because they were willing to talk to me at that moment didn't mean I had to do the same for them. If they really wanted to make peace with me, they should have respected what I said about needing some time away from them and left me alone. Things couldn't always work on their terms, and they needed to realize that I was my own person, not their puppet. That led to a heated argument because they were also quite upset, and eventually my wife had to step in and tell them to go home because there was no way we could reach a conclusion that way. Before they left, my mother, who has always been the more emotional of the two parents, told me that she was aware that maybe she and my father had failed in some way as parents, because otherwise no one would treat their parents this way. But she wanted me to remember that if they had failed as parents, I had also had some failures as their son, but they had always forgiven me and tried to make it work with me. They were important to me. I should try to do the same and make an effort to fix things, instead of constantly trying to prove that I'm perfect and always the victim, while my family are the villains. I would have responded and said something back. But as I said, she has always been the more emotional of my parents, and she had tears in her eyes, so I couldn't say anything to her. After they left, my wife calmed me down because I was still quite upset. Since then, we've been trying to figure out a way to deal with this situation. I don't want to paint my parents as villains, but I also don't think I'm the bad guy here. I'm inclined to blame my brother for creating the situation, but honestly, I still don't know if he had any part in it. Even if he did, it was my parents' decision to skip my wedding and join him on his family vacation. I feel like I'm back at square one, not knowing what to do or how to handle this problem. Update 2. Before getting into this update, I just want to say to everyone who has suggested cutting ties with my parents, it's not that easy. If it were, I wouldn't even be on this site, and I would have done it already. But families are complicated. And as I said, I really don't have anyone besides my parents. It's not that they've always treated me badly. We've also had good times. We're just in a complicated situation right now. I can't say I'm perfect, but I can't say that about them either. So the only two options I have now are to wait until things get so bad that I have no choice but to cut ties or talk to them and try to work things out. I'm leaning towards the second option because, well, I'm a sensible person. Anyway, the last time I met with my parents was 3 days ago, and it didn't go very well. After that, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I just thought I would go back to my previous approach and keep things low-key with them. My wife agreed because we didn't have any better ideas on how to handle it. But then last night, my parents texted me, apologizing for how they behaved the last time we saw each other. They said they shouldn't have provoked or yelled at me. They should have just left me alone when I said I didn't want to talk to them. They're very sorry for what happened, but they still want to make things right with me, so they wanted to know if I'd be willing to have dinner with them this weekend. Now my wife and I are discussing that idea. It's definitely going to be uncomfortable. That much we know for sure. Because so much has happened in the last few weeks that there's no way we could spend an entire evening without talking about it. But it seems like they're trying to make it up to me in some way, and I don't want to ruin my relationship. So I'm willing to give them a chance, and maybe by talking to them, I can salvage what's left of our relationship. Very obvious that we have a lot of misunderstandings and communication issues, which have created a lot of problems between my parents and me, but I don't want to lose them. I really don't. So unless something else comes up or happens in the next few days, we'll probably see them this weekend. I'm going to try to talk things out with them. Wish us luck, and hopefully it will go well. Update 3. Unfortunately, things didn't go well with my parents, and I regret even giving them the benefit of the doubt and going to see them. When I arrived at their house last night with my wife, my brother was there with his family. They knew I don't have a good relationship with my brother, and I think it was pretty nasty of them to surprise me with that, regardless of what their intentions were. Obviously, I was very surprised to see him there. I don't think he was expecting me either, but we had both been lied to. As soon as I confronted them about it, they told me that most of the problems in our family stemmed from the fact two of us didn't get along. I thought my parents treated him better than me. He thought I was a loser who still held a grudge against him for attacking him 10 years ago, even though he really deserved it. So the only solution they came up with was to invite me to dinner and make us talk to each other. Immediately, I told them that I was only there to talk to them, but I had nothing to say to my brother. For once in our lives, we both seemed to be on the same page. We both started to leave, but once again, my mother started crying and said she couldn't believe that both of her sons valued their own pride and ego more than family. I was about to say something, but I guess my brother had already had enough. He told my mother that, considering she had agreed to go on vacation with his family, despite knowing that I was getting married around the same time, she shouldn't be talking about family values at all. Then out of nowhere, he told me that our parents had been lying to me the whole time, and that he knew I was getting married around the same time he was going on vacation. The reason he chose to go on vacation at that time wasn't because he wanted to ruin my wedding, but because, apparently, he was signing a new project in a couple of weeks, and after that, he would be too busy for vacations. So he wanted to do this while he could, and it had nothing to do with me, in case that's what I thought. But still, my parents had a choice, and they chose to go on vacation with him. Now they were blaming him, and acting as if we were both responsible for everything. With that issue clarified, I knew there was no way to forgive my parents. I think things finally reached a point of no return. I had the clarity to know that my parents chose to go on vacation with my brother and his family on purpose, and I really didn't care about their intentions. What I cared about was the fact that they had a choice, and they sealed their fate. But then they tried to lie and really manipulate me into believing that I was the bad guy here. Anyway, after that, I left and blocked them everywhere. I don't think I'll be contacting them again anytime soon. My wife and I are pretty happy on our own, and we're actually going on our honeymoon soon. We were initially going to wait a couple of months, but now I really need a break from all this. Anyway, that's how things are, and I'm better off without my family. Update 4. We just got back from our honeymoon, and although I thought I would have some peace after everything that's happened, especially since we took this vacation to rest and find peace, I found a surprise at the back door of our house. There was a box with a gift from my parents. Inside, I found a framed photo of me with my parents, but curiously, without my brother. The photo seemed old, from a time when things were simpler, or at least that's what they want me to believe. However, I couldn't help but feel that this was a pretty manipulative move on their part. There was also a note attached to the box. In it, they asked me to forgive them and unblock them because, according to the note, my mother is very sick and can't stop crying. I know this is just another attempt to manipulate me into feeling guilty, but the truth is that instead of feeling moved, I feel even more frustrated. My wife has stored the gift in the closet, and for now, we don't plan on giving them a response. Well, there's really no response to give. We don't want to have any contact with them, and that's how it's going to stay. I think I've given my parents many chances, some that they didn't even deserve, and all they do is lie and manipulate. And for those who asked, no, we haven't made up with my brother. I still think he's another part of my family that I want to keep away from. I also don't know what kind of relationship my parents have with my brother now. He left their house very angry that day. Update 5. I didn't think things could get worse, but they did. It was last Sunday afternoon. My wife and I were watching a movie in the living room. The back door was open, as it usually is when we're home. Suddenly, we heard the sound of the back door opening completely, and to our surprise, my parents walked in unannounced. We were startled because it's a quiet neighborhood, so there was no one who could enter. There they were. My mother was already crying when they saw us, her eyes full of tears, while my father looked serious. I asked them what they were doing and told them it couldn't just walk into our house like that, without an invitation, and especially without notice. But they didn't want to listen. They said they couldn't keep enduring the situation, that they needed to fix things right now, because they couldn't take it anymore. My mother kept crying inconsolably, begging me to give them another chance, that she couldn't bear for us to be like this. I took a deep breath and, with the calmest tone I could muster, told them that only family could enter my house, and to me, family was my wife and the children we would have someday. I made it clear they couldn't cross the boundaries of our home whenever they felt like it, especially after everything that has happened. My mother broke down crying even more. I didn't know a human could cry that much, as if my words had shattered her heart. My father held her by the shoulders, trying to comfort her. They finally understood they weren't going to get what they wanted. With no other choice, he turned around and left. Since that day, we've started locking all the doors at any time. The peace of our home is the most important thing now, and I can't allow that peace to be interrupted by anyone, not even them. Edit. We've been told to install cameras, and while it's not a bad idea, we don't believe our parents are dangerous, just very annoying.